Elsa is a functional breathing coach from Sweden based in Los Angeles. She specializes in helping individuals optimize their breath to improve every aspect of their lives. It can be anything from sleep, anxiety, stress, to enhance sports performance, creativity, and nervous system regulation. Her expertise has earned recognition from esteemed medical professionals and clients, including Oscar winners, elite athletes, and Fortune 500 companies. As a breathing expert, she has played a key role in creating content for some of the top breathwork companies, such as Open, Othership, and Respira. If you're interested in learning more about how to use your breath to your advantage, Elsa offers a range of services, including one-on-one coaching, online and in person, on-demand courses and certificates, as well as private and corporate group workshops. Elsa is a dear friend of mine, and I'm so excited to introduce her to you. Welcome to the podcast, Elsa. I'm so happy to see you and be with you.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here with you.
I did your intro before, so everyone already knows who you are that's listening. I always like to do it without the guest present because I get so nervous.
I totally get it.
But I thought a nice place for us to start is how we met because it's kind of serendipitous. I was walking out early days of Open onto Market Street in Venice, and there was people building a restaurant beside our production studio, and I'm chatting them up and I'm sharing about what we do at Open, and Arvid, who is your husband, was like, "Oh, my wife is a breath coach. She's like a functional breath teacher." And so I was like, "Oh, interesting. We're looking looking for those." And
Exactly.
then all of a sudden, here comes Elsa and really changed, I feel like, changed the trajectory of my life, my health, and how I understand the breath. So I really felt like the universe brought us together, you and I.
Yeah, it's so funny when I think back to that story and like how breathwork just aligned for me. Like everything just flew. It came natural, it came organically, and then yeah, like all the different pieces, and then you coming into your neighbors, which is Market, my husband's restaurant, and they're like, "Oh, we're a breathwork studio. We're next door." And they were like, "Oh, my wife just became a breathwork coach." And you're like, "That's exactly what we're looking for." And then all of a sudden, I didn't even know breathwork was like a job that you could work with. And all of a sudden, I am a full-time breathwork coach at like the coolest studio in Venice. And then there you guys are. So yeah, crazy.
Yeah, it really felt like you just kind of got plopped into kind of like the epicenter of, at that time during the pandemic, of wellness, but also of this cutting edge kind of world of work. And really, what Elsa brought to us at that time was this deep knowledge and understanding of the science. And so we sort of intuitively were like, oh, this breathwork thing is amazing. It feels so good. People are having incredible experiences. I knew from my background as with yoga and meditation, the power of breath, but you brought something so incredibly unique. And so I guess my first question is, what inspired you to start learning about the breath?
Yeah. So I moved to LA. I'm from Sweden. Moved to LA 6 years ago, and then I couldn't work for the first time, or for the first couple of months, or a year even, maybe. I can't remember now, because of visa situation. So I was like, okay, I have all this time on my hands, and what do I like to do? And I was like, oh, I like yoga. I should do like a yoga teacher training. So I did that, and then I was like, I finished that and I felt like it was a bit saturated maybe in Venice, and I felt like that I'm not good enough. Like I just became a teacher and there's so many yoga teachers, so what do I got to give, you know? So I felt like okay, it's nice, but it's not my thing. It's not my, like I haven't found the right thing yet, because before I worked in London in operations and I didn't like, it wasn't like I'd found my passion. So, anyways, I did that, and then I started hearing about breathing, and I heard this podcast with James Nestor, and he talked about all these benefits of breathing and how we are supposed to breathe. And I was like, how can we not learn about this in school? I learned so much from what he said that I had never heard before. So then I did a breath coach training just for myself again, just because I wanted to learn more. And then at the same time as I finished this breath coach training, I didn't even think about that it was called breath coach training. I was thinking that it was just a breath training. Someone overheard when I told someone else that I just finished this training, and she was like, "Oh my god, are you a breathwork coach?" And that's when I had to be like, mm-hmm,
Yeah, I am.
nod. just Elsa, nod, say yes. And she was like, oh my God, I read the book by James Nestor, the same podcast that got me into it. And she was like, I know I'm breathing wrong. I need a coach. Are you available to take clients? And I'm like, just keep nodding. So then at the same time, I got my work visa. And then, all of a sudden I had my first client. I was like, okay, I guess let's try this out, this breathwork thing, and see if it works. She told all her friends, and all of a sudden I was in business organically at the same time as I got my work permit. So that's just how I was like thrown into it. And then on top of that came the story when we met, and it was just like, okay, I guess I'm full time now, breathwork coach.
Yeah.
So that's how I started with breathing. But what got me motivated and so like passionate about it is because I heard how much it can help people with anxiety, first of all. Because when I went to school, I had so many friends who, like, the last year of the 3 years, they were like, yeah, I felt so anxious the past 2 years. And I was like, why have you not told me? Or like, and then more and more people were talking about how much anxiety they felt. So I was like so aware that it was so common for people to be stressed and anxious. I hadn't felt it super much myself. I haven't gone through like a bad phase of anxiety or anything. But I just felt like, okay, I know this information and I know it can help people with stress and anxiety. I need to get it out. Like, I need to get it out to those people who need it the most, because it's such a simple way. We do it automatically every day. We don't need to put extra time on it. We just need to tweak it and then continue with our day. So I just saw the potential in breathwork, really. So I wanted to learn everything I could and start teaching people and see if it worked on them. And it did. Like, I've had so much good feedback on just them changing their own breath and
Yeah.
having all the positive benefits. So
Yeah.
yeah, the motivation is really to spread the knowledge about breathing, because so few people know about it. Like, I just
Yeah.
had a breathwork session with SoundCloud, and I went through some of the basics in breathing, and no one have heard about it. I'm like, do you know which one is your main breathing muscle? It's quite big. It's the main breathing muscle for, like, it's the muscle that keeps your breathing going. And people are like, never heard,
No,
you know?
people don't know. They do not know. I think, as you're saying with James Nestor, if people haven't read the book, it's called Breath. You can listen to it. It's incredible. I know a lot of people listening probably have. But James Nestor says, and you probably know the actual percentage. What is the percentage of people that breathe incorrectly in the world?
Yeah, I mean, it's high, and I can't say this is what the studies have found and this is how it is, because it's hard to study the population. But if you ask breathing special, like doctors, some doctors say like 95% of us are breathing incorrectly. So yeah, it's a high percentage, estimated percentage.
So everyone thinks like, okay, well, what's the big deal with breath work? Like, I'm breathing, so I'm doing it right. And this is the big misconception, is that, well, is there a wrong way to breathe? Yes. And is there a right way to breathe? Yes. And it's simple, and doing something so simple, like you said, you don't have to spend all day on it. It's just the simple shift of understanding how to breathe correctly, and how that has this myriad of massive benefits on every single level. So, and maybe let's just start here. How should we be breathing?
Yeah, just firstly touch on the part that you said, like, we breathe automatic. A lot of people are like, when they hear that functional breathing is a thing that you can work on and you can get better at it, they're like, but we're breathing automatically all day long. Of course, my body knows how to do it correctly. But if you trust your body in how to do things, you would, for example, if you follow all your cravings, your natural cravings, you would have pancakes for breakfast every day and ice cream for dinner every day if you were trusting your body's instincts. And that's because we don't live in the world where our bodies are created to live in. We it was 300,000 years ago that our bodies developed, and we are so far away from that, the way of living. That's the quick explanation why we're not always breathing right, even though that's how we automatically breathe, because we don't live the lives our bodies are designed, or our human species is designed to live. And how we are supposed to breathe, if I summarize them into 3 points, I always say you should breathe in and out through your nose, low, and there's a reason I'm not saying deep, as in low, using your diaphragm. And then the third is slow. So nose, low, and slow. And this is just the majority of your breaths throughout the day. It's not every single breath you take throughout the day. You can go to an intense breathwork class and breathe the complete opposite, mouth, chest, fast. That's completely fine. It can even have a lot of, benefits, even physical benefits. And there is sometimes you want to cry or laugh. Of course, you're not going to be like, oh, I'm just not supposed to breathe through my nose. No, you can breathe through your mouth and then there as well. So the important part is just the majority of your breath during the day should be nose, slow, and slow.
Yeah.
Quick and
And
sweet.
what people don't realize maybe is that the nose has over 30 functions. And so let's just for a moment, I feel like we're in training now, but why the nose? What does the nose do for us? Why do we need to be
Yeah,
breathing?
no, but it's a good question because people are like, it doesn't matter. I breathe through my mouth. So what? That's how I've always looked at breathing. I've always heard like breathe into your belly. Like we've all heard it, breathe into your belly. But I never heard why. So I was like, well, I'll breathe into my chest. Who cares? But so, yes, I think it's important to know the reasons why. And that's because you said the nose has over 30 functions that the mouth doesn't have, and those 30 functions are just to prepare the air for your lungs. So, except from breathing and smelling, it's filtering the air, humidifies the air, regulates the temperature of the air you're breathing in. It releases nitric oxide. So, when you breathe through your nose, you release a gas in your nasal cavity called nitric oxide, and that is sterilizing the air because nitric oxide is antiviral, antibacterial, and sometimes even antifungal. So it keeps your nasal cavity and your airways sterilized and clean and healthy. And what else? We lose 42% more water through the mouth because a lot of people are like, when I ask, how do you think we should breathe functionally? They're like, in through the nose, out through the mouth. And that's when I'm like, okay, imagine going on a hike on a sunny day and you breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. You breathe out 42% more water through the mouth, which means you will have 42% less water in your body when you finish your hike. So it makes you dehydrated. Same if you breathe through your mouth during sleep, you also lose more water. And we all know this. I'm sure everyone listening here know this back in their head, because if you would fog a mirror, you would never go like with your nose, you would fog it up with your mouth because the water. Because
Yeah,
that's when you can draw your little.
exactly.
And there are loads of more benefits. We'll probably come in, like touch on them as we go. It's You can also try this at home. You can place one hand on your belly right now, one hand on your chest, and you can breathe in and out through the nose. And just notice if you breathe into your belly or your chest, and then you can try in and out of the mouth. And you will probably feel like when you breathe through your mouth, it's easier to breathe into your chest. And when you breathe into your through your nose, you will probably feel like it's easier to breathe into your belly. So it promotes healthy breathing. It slows down the speed of your breath because the holes in your nose are much smaller than your mouth. Plus, you have like a maze in your nose, which you don't have in your mouth. So it's just easier to breathe fast through your
Yeah.
mouth versus your nose. And when you slow down the breath, you activate your calming parasympathetic nervous system, your heart rate, your stress levels goes down, cortisol goes down, you find your balance in your nervous system. So it's all linked to your nervous system and how you feel overall. I could talk forever.
I know. And it's so simple. And I hope everyone listening to this is just doing this right now, is has a hand on their belly and is focusing on bringing the breath low and slow and through the nose. And you brought up a point around nighttime. And I know that mouth taping is sort of taken off. And I know when you and I met, you were the one that I was already mouth taping, but you introduced me to the little paper tape. It's the cheapest mouth tape option. All of you that are out there buying all these fancy mouth tapes, you don't need those. You just need that 3M paper tape and you just a little tiny, tiny piece on your mouth. But I was a mouth breather for my entire life, and mouth taping really changed my life. For one of the reasons is because you're retaining all of that moisture, so you're not losing. So you're not waking up and feeling so dehydrated, so puffy, bypassing the functions of the nose. So you're feeling, my allergies went away in the morning. I have asthma. We're going to get into that a little bit later. But just that simple act of retraining the body at nighttime through mouth tape, even if you turn off this podcast right now, those two things, nose breathing and mouth tape, I think I know can change your life.
Mm. And if you're at home and you're like, I can barely breathe through my nose, I would never, tape my mouth. Start to just nose breathe more and more. Whenever you can, nose breathe on your next walk. See if you can nose breathe the whole walk. On your next run, next level, see if you can nose breathe. If you go on a run and you're like, never, like you will get used to it, because the more you use your nose, the more it will open up and the easier it will become to breathe through your nose. And the less you breathe through your nose, the more it will clog up. They see it from just a couple of breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth. that the nose starts to clog up even. So just use it and it will start to open up. And there are such good stuff that you can use, like nose strips that will open up your nose. So it's like it lifts your nostrils to open them up. So
Mm-hmm.
if you find it hard, like use nasal strips before you try mouth, and try mouth taping during the day. And if you can keep it on for like 3 minutes while you're on your computer, then you should be good to go during the night. But there
Right.
are some cases where you should not use mouth tape, and that's if you have severe sleep apnea, you need to like go and check that out and get the recommendations from your doctors. But we have also seen that people with sleep apnea, for example, they benefit from taping their
Yeah.
mouths shut. So yeah.
And people are really into also just the vanity benefits of mouth taping because you are retaining that moisture, so your skin looks better. But also, as it pertains to the way your face looks and your jaw and your teeth, can you talk a little bit about that? I think anyone that read James Nestor's book that has a slight bit of vanity in them, they were like, oh my God, I need to close my mouth
Yeah.
immediately.
I mean, yes, I will say the benefit, you get some beauty benefits from keeping that moisture, making yourself hydrated even when you sleep. Because I mean, what's the number one health or beauty hack we've heard about? It's like drink a lot of water. We've said that for so long. And the simple thing you can do is just or close your mouth. But when it comes to your facial structure, because your face develops when you're little, it's already sort of set in place when you're adult. You can't really just tape your mouth and like change your jaw or anything, but you can chew. There's a lot of people who have like started chewing on things, and they see like how they develop more muscles in their jaw, and then they start to see more like, what do you call it, like
Yeah.
definition. Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not going to say like, yeah, tape your mouth and your face will change, but you have all these other benefits that is impacting your nervous system and health and mental health too.
Yeah. One of my favorite Elsa stories was I was showing her photos of my nephews and they're little, and I was like, aren't they cute? And she just zoomed in and saw their teeth and was like, oh my God.
No, I don't remember that.
Do you remember that? It was such a funny Elsa moment, but it's true because kids like the way that their teeth are growing in and crowding, and there's so much. I mean, even I see it with my baby niece now too. Like she's mouth breathing at night at 2 years
Mm.
old, and I'm just like, oh man, it's just yeah. From such a young age, our mouths are just gaping open, and for the rest of our lives, and so it's maybe harder to correct when we're younger, but as we get older, there's ways that we can really become aware of how we're actually breathing.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point for parents. Like, check how your kids are breathing, because I'm reading a book now called Jaws. It's by a few professors from Stanford who have studied this for so long, like how mouth breathing can affect your whole like airways, your just so many things. So keep an eye on your kids if they are mouth breathing. Somehow teach them how to nose breathe. Like there was a painter who traveled across America like 150 years ago. So he was traveling around America and was like drawing portraits of Native Americans. And on his journey, he learned so much about like why do they have these like wide jaw, perfectly straight teeth. They don't even have a dentist probably. And that's because their moms or their parents taught their kids when they were super super young to close their mouth every time they ate. So for example, they were breastfeeding, and straight after breastfeeding they make sure to like gently squeeze their lips together to make sure their babies were nose breathing. And if they saw they were sleeping with their mouth open, they just like
Mm.
gently pinch their mouth closed. So teach them from an early age to avoid different like braces, for example, or just adjustments. Or
Yeah.
there's so many horrible things that I've read about in this book that can come from mouth breathing in kids. So
Yeah.
it's serious, and especially if your kids are snoring, that's also serious. That's You should look that up
Yeah.
because you can
Yeah.
fix it easy.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, for someone like me who had chronic asthma as a child into my adulthood, something not until I met you did I really start to understand asthma and the work of Patrick McEwen and the oxygen advantage, but understanding that asthma is chronic overbreathing.
Mm.
And I didn't understand how, especially as a young person, how to regulate myself when I was having an asthma attack and how to really work with my breath. Is there anything you want to share about asthma, or maybe like the Buteyko method, or just because for someone like me, I was like, oh, I'm just going to have asthma for the rest of my life. I'm always going to suffer. And then this is what I mean when I said in the beginning that Elsa changed my life because it changed my health. So what can we say about asthma here that would be useful?
Yeah, I mean, they've done a few studies on asthma and breathing techniques, and the breathing techniques are about actually breathing less, which
Yeah.
does not make sense for most people. And we could go into it, but it's a little complicated. But, anyways, they were doing breathing practices that train them to breathe less. And what they found was, after, I can't remember exactly the study, but they drastically could reduce both their medications for asthma. So,
Yeah.
both the sterilizer and the, what's it called, like the
Like the fast acting inhaler, like
yeah,
a Ventolin and then the steroid. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So both of those they could reduce it. One they got rid of completely, and the other one they reduced a lot. So asthma and breathing obviously are directly linked, but you can also train how to breathe to almost get rid of a lot of your symptoms and reduce the medications, because I mean, medication is super important, and you should continue to take your medication before you consult with your doctor if you start to learn breathing practices. So don't just stop,
Yeah.
always consult with a doctor. But what was I going to say? It can help your breathing so
Mhm.
much, and so it will be interesting to hear a little bit about your journey. Like, what did you start to do, and how did it change?
Yeah, I think, I mean, mouth taping was huge. I think that was
Mm,
like number one, like the easiest place to start was just getting my mouth shut at nighttime. So I
mm,
was waking up with less wheezing and stuffy nose and just like overall kind of feeling inflamed. Slowly through my nose
mm,
throughout the day when I could remember, this isn't like you're going to nail it every single breath, but it was like when I'm walking home from work or I'm riding my bike or I'm watching TV, it's like, oh, okay, can I really slow this down so that I am breathing less breaths per minute?
mm,
And then the Buteyko method, and if people
mm,
are interested, feel free to go down that rabbit hole. There's a lot of like really weird YouTube videos from like the 80s, but basically breathing and then holding my breath on the out
mm,
breath, plugging my nose, holding, starting with 5 seconds, building up to 10, 15. So building the carbon dioxide in the system and then rebreathing it. I actually just went through, living in Mexico City and the rains have come now. And we're in an old apartment. And I was like, oh, my asthma is bad for the first time
mm.
in a long time. And so I just do a few rounds of that. And I'm like, oh, I can breathe again. So it's versus reaching. And again, I'm all for modern medicine. I always have my inhalers with me. But there needed to be a little bit of a balance of some inhaler action and then some of these breathwork techniques that were super, super useful.
Yeah, because when you can use your breath to open up your airways naturally with breathing techniques. So we sort of know, like, yeah, breathing is so good and you should breathe slow and low and nose, but we don't really know exactly how to get there. Or like we often misinterpret how we should breathe. Like we say, take a deep breath, and we go like, so instead of breathing deep down to the bottom of your lung, like, what does deep meaning? Deep in the ocean. It means so like far. It means all the way down to the bottom. And when we take a deep breath, what do? We breathe up, close to the surface. So we know the breath can help. We just don't know how exactly to use
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah.
in for asthmatics or for people with asthma, you just, if you learn exactly how your breath can help you, can support you, instead of using your breath against you, because that's sometimes what we do. We feel like we can't get enough air, and we start to breathe more, and we maybe even start to breathe through the mouth, and then we're sort of having the opposite effect. That will constrict your airways even more. So
Yes.
that's why it's so good to like learn exactly how the breath is impacting your body, because oftentimes you should do the opposite of what you think you should do in breathing actually.
Totally. Yeah, Elsa was always on us as yoga teachers because yoga teachers have this funny habit of always saying, take a big breath in. We have all these cues around big breath, and you're always like, no, I don't like that languaging because what it makes people do is, and a lot of you are probably listening to this and not watching this, but is just to bring your shoulders up and take the breath really up into the chest versus cueing slower, deep, meaning, like you said, the bottom of the ocean floor down into the
Mm.
belly. versus up into the chest.
Yeah.
And so it really changed my languaging and even the
Mm.
way I was cueing breath in yoga.
And it's interesting. I mean, I'm all for like take a deep breath, take a big breath, take a cleansing breath here and there, or start with 3 cleansing breaths. Some breathwork coaches are very against it. They're like, oh, these deep breaths, you can do 3 and people will feel relaxed. And then if you hold at the end of your last exhale, perfect. But so yeah, I'm all for like do a cleansing breath here and there, but do it with a purpose. What is the purpose about this big breath? Like know why you're cueing it, but then come back to slow nose breathing, because otherwise if we cue too many cleansing breaths in a yoga class, it can turn into a hyperventilation class, and we don't want to exercise or calm our mind when we're hyperventilating. Then we will go for a breathwork class. We will do that in that breathwork class, but not in yoga, because so much of the tradition in yoga is like quiet your breath to calm your mind. Like
Yeah.
when your breath is steady, when your breath is quiet, your mind is steady. It's all the like that's the root of yoga. Quiet your breath to quiet your mind.
Yeah.
And now we're doing the opposite. We're like taking these big breaths, and I've started to do some research, like what happened? Like where did we get it wrong? Why did we start to breathe more when we're actually maybe supposed to breathe less if you read the ancient texts? And it could be because like during the late 1800s, I think it was, when tuberculosis was spreading, there was a movement that thought that, okay, if we take these big breaths, these big cleansing breaths, we can be healthier, or we can get rid of tuberculosis. And that spread even in the yogic tradition. So teachers were starting to spread this healthy big breaths, and that's when it started to change in the Western world about how we breathe in yoga. So
Interesting.
it's just interesting to like just do a little search on that and how it has completely changed from how it started.
Yeah. And you're probably blowing everyone's mind right now because even for me, when I started to learn this information, I was like, but what do you mean breathe less?
Mm-hmm.
Because we teach this in trainings, and Elsa and George and I created a training internally at Open. And this was the hardest thing to get through people's heads. Okay, deep, I understand. Okay, slow, no problem. But less, what are we really saying about breathing less?
Yeah. So breathing less means taking less volume of air into your lungs, plus taking less breaths per minute. So instead of taking 20 breaths per minute, try taking 10 breaths per minute. So that's like breathing less and less. And also, yeah, so less volume of air. This is a big breath. I'm taking in a lot of air and I'm breathing out a lot of air. This is a breath where I breathe less. You can't see it.
Yeah.
I just took a very slow breath, less breath, and I was completely still. And then first I took a very big breath, and you saw my whole body move or change, especially shoulders and chest going up. So that's what breathing less means. It's both the volume and the number of breaths. And why we should breathe less. Let's go through it. Let's do the little journey. Okay, let's see if people listening, but pretend that your fist is coming in through. Your fist is your oxygen. It comes in through your nasal cavity and then into your lungs. And there, this oxygen molecule diffuses into your blood. In your blood, your oxygen is captured by hemoglobin. So now oxygen is captured in a little cage, and there it starts its journey in your blood vessels. So let's pretend this oxygen molecule is going to your brain, so you're able to think clearly, understand what we're saying, remember something. So it starts its journey up to your brain, and there you want this oxygen molecule to be released into your brain. So from your bloodstream and blood vessels into your brain. And then you need to unlock the oxygen from its cage, which is hemoglobin. And what do we need to unlock a cage, to open a cage? We need
Key.
a key. We need a key to unlock the cage so that we can utilize the oxygen. We just breathe it in. And this key is carbon dioxide. And what happens when we breathe fast? What do we breathe in? We breathe in oxygen and we breathe out carbon dioxide. So when we start to breathe fast, maybe even through the mouth, we breathe out a lot of keys, which means oxygen is stuck in its cage and we can't utilize it. When we breathe less, on the other hand, we allow the number of keys to increase because we're not breathing them out so fast. And that is also allowing more oxygen to be released from all the small, tiny cages and into our brain. So that's how breathing less can actually give you more, because our body is always producing carbon dioxide. It's like the rest product of our metabolism. And when we breathe slowly, it keeps building up carbon dioxide, but we don't release it as fast. So we build up carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide helps to release oxygen into your brain. And when we breathe more, we breathe out more carbon dioxide. We don't have all the keys. We can't utilize the oxygen. So even though you breathe a lot, you cannot utilize the oxygen you breathe in.
Yeah. And that is called the Bohr effect.
Exactly.
I love
That's the
this
name.
because I think the sort of basic understanding, the high school understanding is like, I breathe in oxygen, I breathe out CO2, and that's basically all I know. And so I think really where the deeper understanding here is understanding carbon dioxide. And I don't think people understand carbon dioxide. And I love your analogy with the keys. I've heard you say it a million times. We've made many slides together, many explanations, but that is my favorite explanation of the Bohr effect. And so, given all of this information, we've been talking about nose breathing. We understand, like now with that science in place, now everyone's question is, but what about active breath work? Because an active breath work, which I teach, lead trainings on, is doing the exact opposite of everything Elsa said. You're breathing through your mouth, you're breathing belly, but then up into your chest, and it's fast. And so, here's why I love Elsa's component and what she's brought to this conversation is because, yes, what all the things we just described is optimal, healthy, everyday breathing. So that when you go into an active breathwork class, you're creating this really safe container to create a stress event in the body. It's what we're doing is the way that we've been explaining breathing through the nose is going to down regulate, is going to balance the nervous system, is going to help you feel calm and relaxed. When you come into an active breathwork class, we're amping up. And so the Bohr effect is not happening, that gas exchange is not happening. And so we're getting 40% less oxygen to the brain. And people are like, but what do you mean? That's so scary. What do you mean? Why are we doing that? And so the explanation there is when there's less oxygen in the brain, this is why you're having a lot of these psychedelic out of body experiences. And because we're only doing it for about 30 minutes, it's a safe container to do so. So I think that information is not widely out there. And those who weren't trained by Elsa or have this understanding, you hear a lot in active breathwork classes, we're getting so much oxygen into the body. You're not. You're doing the opposite. So do you want to debunk any other sort of myths or sort of talk about this balance? Because I think this is a big point of maybe confusion in the breathwork world. People don't fully understand what's going on in the active breathwork sessions.
No, but that's probably the number one myth. Like, oh, we're breathing all this oxygen and we saturate our brain with oxygen. That's why we have these experiences. But it's, yeah, as you said, the opposite. We can't utilize all the oxygen we breathe in. We just breathe it out again. We breathe in 21% oxygen. We breathe out 16% oxygen. So you never utilize all the oxygen you breathe in, and even less than in like when you do deliberately fast breathing. But I was thinking about something. Yes. So it's not a myth, but it's an important thing to think about in these active breathwork sessions. It's how you breathe before and after, because maybe most people haven't never heard about functional breathing or no, slow, or they've heard about it, but they don't really think about it. So I think that's an important part, because you go to one of those breathing classes, and then because you only have so much time, you can only give so much information, and you're focusing on what you're getting out of that session. But they have never been taught how to breathe when you get out. You're not supposed to continue to breathe up into your chest, and you're not supposed to breathe through your mouth, and you're not supposed to breathe fast. But we have set this like habit in our brains. So some people don't come back to functional breathing. They keep breathing dysfunctionally, and that could take a hit on their nervous system. So it's important to, if you do these kind of breathing practices, because they're so upregulating, it's important to really downregulate with your breath. And it's not just about the nervous system, it's about the balance between your blood gases, which is oxygen and carbon dioxide, because they are a bit unbalanced after one of these active breathwork classes. Carbon dioxide is very low because you have breathed out all the carbon dioxide, and it takes time for it to come back to its healthy level so that you can take up the oxygen after the class. So that's important. So maybe after you do one of the active sessions, make sure that if you don't do it in the session, when you get home, do some exhale breath holds, because when you hold your breath, carbon dioxide increases because you're not letting it out. You're holding it in because you don't breathe. So do a few breath holds. Exhale, hold, and then notice when you feel that trigger to breathe, hold a little longer, and then breathe in.
Yeah.
So different breathwork practices to balance your blood gases to become healthy again, because they might be a little off after one of those classes.
Yeah. And I think this is really important for those of you that are looking for teachers or going to classes. And if you feel like you're leaving an active breathwork session, like still on another planet or super super buzzy, making sure that you're doing your aftercare practices, which is coming back to the nose and coming back to less and slow. But really the good sign of a great active breathwork teacher is that they know all of this information, and they are giving you a really long runway to integrate so that you're actually leaving feeling balanced, because ideally the practice can start to balance you out so long as you have that time to integrate. And that's always why we finish with exhale, hold for as long as what feels comfortable, so that you can start to bring that CO2 up and start to
Exactly.
balance out.
And I think maybe most people don't know it. Why do we hold our breath in a breathwork class?
Yeah.
It's for different reasons, but also for the physiological reasons, to increase carbon dioxide back to its healthy level.
Yeah.
And that's also why you can hold for so long after you've been hyperventilating, because you breathe it out so much carbon. We haven't talked about that carbon dioxide is the trigger to breathe, but we could go down that route.
There's so many rabbit holes.
Yeah, yes. And it's complicated. Breathing is complicated. It's not as easy as we think. It's not just like take a deep breath. We're doing ourselves as like not a favor. But so the trigger, if you hold your breath now at home or listening to this, exhale, hold your breath. Hold, keep holding. Hold until you feel that desire to breathe. You might feel your chest bubbling, or you might feel your diaphragm starts to spasm, or you might just feel panic, raw panic. When you feel that, come back to nose breathing. But just remember that feeling is triggered by the increase in carbon dioxide, not by the decrease in oxygen, because there is no decrease in oxygen if you just hold your breath for a minute. So the trigger behind every breath is carbon dioxide, not a lack of oxygen. So why you can hold your breath so long after hyperventilation or hyperventilating in one of those classes is because your CO2 is so low. So it takes so long time for CO2 to go up till it triggers you to breathe.
And if you want to know more about this is why we have trainings. This is why we have the breath curriculum, which is Elsa's program. And do you want to speak a little bit about that? And then I want to get into some female breathing. But do you want to share a little bit about this content that you've created? And we do our active breathwork training, which Elsa had a huge hand in. And then we encourage all of anyone who's trained with us to then go listen and learn from Elsa, because we have the active piece, but then there's this whole other world that's so, so important, more important.
I mean, both are important, but it's really important how you breathe on a day-to-day basis, because that's what can have a big impact. Negative if you're breathing dysfunctionally, and positive if you're breathing functionally. So don't forget about your daily breathing. But yeah, that's what I go through in breath curriculum. So my company is called Breath Curriculum. I have one-on-one coaching if you prefer that. I have online courses on demand that you can do in your own pace. There's no deadlines. There is a certificate too if you want to be a functional breathing coach. So yeah, in these online sessions, I always make sure that I go through a practice and the science behind it. So first you learn, why are we doing this specific breathing practice? What happens in the body? What happens to your heart rate? What's the science? Is there any history behind this practice? And then a separate video to just practice. So you can come back to the practice video over and over again without hearing all like why. So you learn really why you should do different breathing practices in different situations, because sometimes we pick the wrong breathing practice for the wrong situation. So we have the opposite effect. And not everyone needs to know the science, but for me, it makes me more confident in what I'm talking about and comfortable in what I'm talking about. And that's the feedback I hear from my students. They're like, oh, I know this is great, but I don't know why. And when I have my active classes, people ask me about functional breathing and I have no clue what it is, you know? So it's linked, but it's two different things. But it's just nice to have the other part too. So that's what I go through in the certificate. A lot of yoga teachers have done it, because they're also like, there might also be breathwork coaches and just people who are into this and like, oh, I want to coach this, I want to teach this, but I don't feel confident enough to teach it because I don't know exactly what's going on. And then I also have courses for people who just want to sleep better or be able to control their anxiety and not have their anxiety control them. And that's easy with breath work. You just need to learn how to use your breath for you instead of against you.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Incredible. I think this is so important because there's only so much you can get accomplished. For those of you that have done your 200-hour teacher training, maybe if you come to my teacher training, I'll talk a lot more about breath because I have this in understanding and knowledge and science because of Elsa. But most of the times you get out of these trainings, and even with one of the first active breathwork trainings that I did, there was zero science. It was all technique. And even some of the biggest breathwork teachers that have been around for the longest, they don't include any science. And so this piece of it, I think, is so useful. And Elsa, I don't know anyone that is more well researched and well read than you are. Like, this woman is so full of knowledge and wisdom and different anecdotal, just here's a story about this, like some story no one's ever heard of. Like, you just constantly are blowing my mind with your information. So you are like my number one recommendation always, all of the time, when it comes to breath work, but specifically the functional breathing piece. For those of you that have probably lots of different ailments and things going on, breath is usually where I want people to start. I'm like, how are you breathing?
Mm,
Because that can just trickle down into everything.
mm,
So I want to switch gears a little bit because you've spoken about this just a little bit.
mm,
And I know maybe like there's a little chapter in Patrick McEwen's book, The Breathing Cure, but it's not really out there when it comes to the differences between male and female breathing and even the size of our airways or how our breathing shifts as we come closer to menstruation. And I just feel like this information is not known. So, and I know you're still learning just like I am. But is there anything here that you can share about female breathing that guaranteed most people listening to this are females? So, what do we need to know specifically about our own breathing and our own airways?
Yeah, I mean, I've started to listen more and more about just the difference between men and women when it comes to everything, when it comes to fasting, when it comes to working out, when it comes to taking ice baths, when it comes to the sauna. Like, we're all hearing all the science that are done on men, and we're like, oh, that's what the science says, that's what the science says, so we should do it too. And then you realize, oh, it's completely opposite for women because we work completely different from men. So now I'm just like having in my head, and like whenever I learn something about the body, I always need to ask myself, is it the same for women? Because this information that you hear is probably coming from how it works for men.
Yeah.
So always ask yourself, is it the same for women? And when it comes to breathing, so just looking at your menstrual cycle, you have the first cycle, follicular cycle, and then you have the luteal phase or phases. And if you find it hard to remember this, how I remember is it's first comes follicular, later comes luteal. So maybe help someone home. Anyway, so first part of your cycle is starting on the first day of your period, and then your progesterone is low. And then just after ovulation, progesterone rises. Same if you're pregnant. The longer you go on your pregnancy, the higher your progesterone. And progesterone, what we know about it is that it's a breathing stimulant. So you breathe faster, the higher your progesterone is. So your natural breathing rhythm will change throughout your cycle, because so you maybe recognize, like, in a specific phase of your cycle you're more breathless, and when you're pregnant you definitely feel like you're getting more and more breathless, and this has different reasons. It's because the blood flow is stronger as well, but it's also because progesterone is a stimulant to breathe. So, and also when you're in your later phase, your luteal phase, you are less stress resilient. So if I would get and give any recommendations, you could probably breathe however you want throughout your cycle. But if you want to breathe with your cycle a little bit, you could, for example, avoid all those upregulating breathing practices in the later stage of your cycle when progesterone rises, because you're not as stress tolerant. I wouldn't probably do very strong breath holds. That is very stressful on your body. I would do calm breathing that will calm your nervous system, because in your luteal phase, your sympathetic drive is stronger. So your stress drive is stronger in your later state. So to calm that, to balance that, I would do down regulating breathing. So very calm, soft breathing. And then in the first phase of your cycle, that's when you can do push yourself a little harder. Maybe push yourself more in your active breathwork classes. And when I say active breathwork classes, I mean the transformational, the conscious connected, all those up-regulating breathing practices. Maybe you should, if you do one a month, maybe you can put it there just before you ovulate, for example. Maybe you don't feel comfortable doing it when you have your period. You might have cramps and stuff. So just put it just before your ovulation or during your ovulation, because that's when you're more resilient to stress.
I
So that's
love that.
just
I think I get that question a lot, that people are like, oh, I have my period. Is active breath work good for me? And intuitively, without understanding the science, it was like, for me, the body's already in a release phase. It's already in a shedding. Like, I don't think you need to then have a big cathartic breathe on top of it. Some of us do, and that's totally fine. But I think that what you just said also correlates really beautifully with ice baths or going on a long run, and just really honoring the natural cycles of our bodies and understanding what's needed in each different week, in each different phase. But I think also what's interesting with the female body too, is it true that our airways are smaller?
So when you compare to size, so it doesn't have to do with like the male being bigger
Yeah.
physically than a woman, but we have like 10 to 30% smaller lungs. We have 30% more narrow airways. We have, I think it was 9% shorter diaphragm. So we just need to work harder to get to the same place as men. It impacts our speed and power. So that's just like, don't be too hard on yourself if you're comparing yourself to your male friend or your partner who's a male. Yeah, just we are different for reasons
Mm-hmm.
that are 300,000 years old.
When I learned this information, you and I talked about this many years ago around female breathing and right before your cycle, and I started to sort of map that even with my asthma. Oh yeah,
Mm,
actually, if I look month over month, I do realize that right before I get my period, I
mm,
do notice myself breathing shallow and short. I'm like,
mm,
wow, okay, that is pretty, like, it's, yeah, by the book. Every month feels the exact same way. And so, how
mm,
can I support myself in that time, in that little window? And maybe you do the breath curriculum, or a lot of breath work. You understand how to do some different types of breath work. People don't realize, like, conscious connected or three-part or transformational, kind of the stuff that I teach and we teach is just one end of breath work, but there's a whole other category and library of pranayama or breathing exercises that are great for down regulation. And I think
mm.
if women specifically understood that around their cycles, it could really help us regulate our mood, really help us regulate our emotions, really help us regulate just getting through our day to day life in that time.
Yeah, and they've done studies on the female cycle and breathing and pain, like pain tolerance, and we are less tolerant to pain in our later stage. So after ovulation, before period, and you can do so. So in the first phase, you can prepare your breathing to become more resilient to stress
Mm-hmm.
and become a slower breather in the second part.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I mean PMS, when does that happen? When progesterone rises and we start to breathe faster. And
Right.
yeah, so they've seen a link between breath rate and pain, like PMS and stuff.
So
So it's a
interesting.
whole world of that research, which is super interesting. How
Yeah,
it's
there's
all linked together and how you can actually, like, there's so few things you can take control of inside your body, but you can take control of your breath. And when you can control your breath, you can also control your heart rate, for example, your blood pressure, your parasympathetic nervous system, your like cortisol levels. So your breath is your link into your internal world, how you can control your internal world, because we can control if we want to hold our breath now or if we want to exhale longer. So you can really indirectly take control of your internal world with your breath if you know how to.
It's so cool. And then it becomes this fun little game. Okay, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
check in with myself. How am I feeling right now? What do I need right now? Okay, I'm feeling really sleepy and kind of lower energy, but I have a meeting in the next 10 minutes and I want to upregulate just a little bit to have a little bit of mental clarity. I want to do a couple physiological sighs and then get ready to go. Or I'm trying to go to sleep at night and I have a breathwork pattern that's going to help me start to down regulate and off ramp from the day. And I mean, this was the fun part working together at Open, is that we created all of that content together and figured out, like, I would be in the booth. Talk about not being able to breathe in like this tiny little closet, and Elsa out there on the computer and just working all of these different sort of equations for what you want to
Mm.
do with your nervous system. And once you understand that, that just unlocks so much for people. And then
Mm.
people just don't know. And that's the reason why I wanted to have you on this podcast, because it's like, oh my gosh, if only people knew or got a taste of this information. And
Mm.
so, other than your program, we talked about James Nestor breath. Are there any other like resources or books people can read or places to start?
Yeah, I mean, while we're on the topic of female breathing, I've started to listen to so many podcasts with Dr. Stacy Sims. She's an expert in female health and especially athletic health, but she knows everything. So I would recommend her if you're interested in in how to. She's talking about, like, she's saying so many things that we don't know, that we have to eat before we exercise, and we should not exercise on an empty stomach and not with a coffee, especially on an empty. Like, she's going through all of those things because that works perfectly for men. That
Right.
will make them leaner and stronger, and it works the opposite for us. We restore fat and we don't put on muscle when we work out. I just had to share this because I just listened to her. But
Please.
like, it's an interest, like, things that we're like, oh, we thought we could train like the men and get the same results, but we should train the complete opposite to get results. So anyways, I recommend her. And then of course Patrick McEwen's books. He's very, like, quite squared, so if you want to read everything and every single word about everything, go to his books because they're like 500 pages, but they're interesting. You can skip to your chapter if you want. He has a few books, so just look for Patrick McEwen and pick the book that you resonate with. And then of course James Nestor that we talked about in the beginning. I highly recommend to everyone because it's just following his journey. It's like anyone can read it. And what else? Sources, breathwork apps out there. I also have a breathing library, so you can try it out for free for 30 days. Pick your best practices, and then just take it. You can unsubscribe, but at least you've learned something, and maybe you found a few practices that you liked. I mean, I read and consume so much content. There are podcasts and there are YouTube interviews, and yeah.
Yeah, Elsa is like in the encyclopedia. I don't think you ever stop learning or your understanding just grows and grows and grows. And thank you, because I feel like your contribution to the breathwork space is so immense. And I think you dropped some things into the water for all of us that's changed the industry, and it needed to. And I think that was part of why we wanted to start creating trainings internally and then externally, because it was like, the breathwork world is missing these pieces. We can't just upregulate people and send them to the moon and say goodbye. And of course, people get off on that and it's really exciting and you have these big experiences, but you need the balance, and you really have offered and brought in the balance and backed it up with science in a way that people can really get it and understand it. So yeah, just thank you for your contribution to the space, because it to me anyways, it just feels so important. And yeah, I just could sing your praises all day long. I like just love you so deeply, and I miss you. I mean, we used to be every single day sitting there at Zinc in Venice, you, me, and George, and just creating
Talk
something
about
really,
breathing.
yeah, talking about breathing. And so I just love seeing everything that you're creating. And it's just such quality content and so needed. There's no fluff. There's so much fluff around there, around the social media these days, and these quick little cheap bits and pieces. And so, if you want to learn from the real deal, it's Elsa. I promise you, everyone. So thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for your time and your energy and your wisdom. And we'll drop in the show notes how to access all of Elsa's content and learn from her. But thank you so much, Elsa, for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was so fun. I feel like we can talk about it forever.
There's so many more. We'll have to have you back on, and I feel like that was a good foundation for people. And then we can go on to the next and the next and the next. So we'll do it
Perfect.
again.
Sounds good. I'd love to be back.
Okay. Bye, Elsa.
Bye.